Mic's on. All right, so we're ready. Gamer Dude 2088, and today we're going to talk about TOT preparation. Figure since I'm, doing all this TOT content and it's like my favorite part of the game. I just enjoy the challenge and the trial and error, building units and trying to survive and CC and passively body things. But I know it's like I get to repeat myself a million times in every TOT video, and I'm probably going to continue to do it because it's somebody that hasn't saw any of my videos that's going to need to know the same information. But we're going to kind of go over that into maybe a little more detail, just a little bit in today's video. First, I want to talk about stat requirements, and I talk about this quite a bit, but it's important to having some form of stat requirements. Your basic RAF requirements or dungeon requirements, having over 10,000 HP, 1,000 defense, good benchmarks to have. But going a little step further into TOT, since it's the mid to late game kind of content, you want to kick it up a notch. And take a look at my notes here because I kind of got this stuff written down. But you want to go around like the 14k HP mark and like a 1.1k defense, if at all possible. You don't necessarily have to have these stats in order for it to work, but these are good benchmarks to shoot for, just in case something happens and the unit takes some damage and things like that. I know you might not be able to get both stats all the time, because not even on all my units is like that. Like let's say, for instance, see, we're close here with our Green Goblin, but not quite there. We don't necessarily use Green Goblin in TOT, but in certain instances, Green Goblin does come out. But like my Sapphire, for instance, I always have problems with Sapphire dying in a fight, like one of the first to die, just because my Sapphire is not meeting those base minimums and requirements stat-wise for as far as HP and defense goes. So gotta take it up a notch, get some better glyphs, keep grinding until we get what we need for our units to be able to progress a little better in the game. So for that, we'll move on into like speed requirements, and I got several like speed requirements personally. Now for the speed requirements, they're pretty much based off of information that I've been finding out in the MMEG Discord. Like a lot of people talk about how fast is this boss, how fast is that boss, how fast is this boss. And for TOT Advanced, not the Nightmare, 200 speed will ensure you, I believe, it's 200 or 210, one of those, 200 or 210 speed will ensure that you are faster than every boss and every unit in TOT. So if you can get yourself up that high, then you're good to go on getting first turn in all situations. Now I know most of us probably not having that kind of speed, especially if you're a little early to mid game. This is my fastest unit right here, and he's only 171. And once I get so high, you got bosses with 180, 195 speed, and it's like I can't do nothing about that. And I don't bring him into those fights anyway, so I'm generally with a lot less speed. Normally my fastest unit in my TOT team is my faceless at 157. So in a lot of situations we do get outsped, so having tanky enough stats to survive a hit or maybe even two is good to have if you're in that kind of situation. Or just bring in some immunity, and that saves the day. But you're gonna need a lot of different things to go through TOT, and just to make things a lot easier for you. But I also have like another speed requirement that you could meet of the 160 mark. 160 is like a good benchmark to have for most of what you're going to be dealing with TOT. Besides those occasions where you're just going to be outsped by practically everything. But 160 will ensure just in most situations that you're faster You're faster than most of the ads and some of the bosses, because once you get into the later stages, I think like 70, 80 and above, that's when the bosses are generally faster than you. Having some kind of form of immunity and cleansing and all that kind of stuff is like critically. Then, like I always say, shoot for about 80% accuracy as a base minimum, because that will carry you like halfway decently without you having too much frustration with units not being CC'd properly. And you always want to shoot for higher, and then you got to test things out and really see what goes on in your runs. Like watch and pay attention to how often your debuffs are landing and things of that nature, because RNG is different for everybody. My RNG is not the same as your RNG, not the same as his RNG, not the same as her RNG, not the same as the next person's RNG. So even though I'm saying shoot for 80% as a base minimum, maybe 75% is good for you, maybe even 60. I don't know. Maybe you do decently getting halfway through TOT with less, or maybe the requirements is more. Maybe you have to hit 90, 100 just to see decent runs. But just based off of my own personal RNG, this is what I'm providing for you in order for you to be able to clear in most scenarios. For the people that I've helped so far, they generally been able to clear and do a good job of things. So I think I'm onto something in some kind of way. Now let's talk about skills and skill requirements and things of that stuff, because you're gonna need a hell of a lot of skills. You're gonna need so many skills, it's ridiculous. And let's take a look at the notes here so we can know what we're talking about here. All right, you need your basic heals and cleansing and stuff like that. That's going to be definitely important to have coming in. You're going to want a main healer. What I mean by main healer, something that does an AOE heal, preferably something like a regenerator. Let's say like we got Fire Nev. She has a solid regeneration on her third, and some extra stuff to add with that, as well as the Earth Pixie, which is a really strong healer once you get her all skilled up and everything too, which also has a regeneration. Static heals aren't bad, but it's just like you have to wait for those turns to get that static heal again, where the regeneration is you get that heal every turn over time. So if you're taking damage or anything's happening, you still get that heal going. And in that nature, so you definitely want that. If you have a off healer, something that has a strong single target healer to support your main healer, that's good as well. Like WHS has a really strong off heal that can top off any unit, especially if they're critical and the regeneration doesn't work right away. That's one of those times where you want a static heal on top of a regeneration to be added into your roster. Not exactly necessary to have, but definitely having a unit like this is kind of critically important going through TOT, at least in my experience. A few other things that you might want to bring is like CDR, which is cooldown reducers. Just like WHS, if you have say Air Crusader, who else? Urzela, I think it's the Water Vampire. All of them are definitely good units to have in your roster, so you can get your skills up, so you can perform your CC as faster, and you can get your passive damage kicked out as quickly as possible and as efficient as possible. It's critically important to have a CDR, and if you don't worry, eventually you'll pull. Trust me, it'll happen eventually. But if you don't, then having extra CC, a turn booster, extra heals will help carry you along until you're able to bring something in like that. Something that's going to be able to get you more turns and mitigate the enemy's turns as possible, so you can get more skills out and they get less out, if that makes sense. Now, from my experience in TOT, And from what I gather from people giving out advice in the MMEG Discord, you get into some fights where you're dealing with healers or passive heal, and it's like a lot of people are like, man, I can't get past this boss. They keep out healing me, and you know the first thing a person says, bring a heal block, and I beg to differ. I have yet to build a unit that has a heal block. I honestly don't even know who has a heal block off the top of my head. I know somebody, but I don't really know off the top of my head like who really has a heal block. But the only reason I say this is because if you perform in the proper CC and you stacking your poisons, your curs, your parasites, whatever you may be using, you can out DPS any heal. I have yet to have to use a heal block myself, so until I'm put in that situation, I'm still like, well, if I don't need it, I'm not going to build it. I'm not going to use it. But that doesn't mean don't do it. Heal block is still strong. It's still strong, and it may help you more in your current situation and what you got going on if you do use it. Now, I'm saying it's not a necessity if you have the right tools and understand how to properly build your teams to accommodate for the lack of having a heal block. Man, was that a lot I was trying to say there? If you do bring it, it will make the fighting world easier, because without having a heal block, you still got to deal with the heal happening on top of things. So things might take a little longer, and if you don't meet those stat requirements, those benchmarks, those speeds, you might get hit with a few things you don't like and watch your team die repeatedly until you finally get it. TOT 60 September. Yeah. But that's just one of the things I kind of wanted to point out. Now, let's say you do meet that 160 speed requirement at a base minimum, and you're dealing with something that's going to a boss that's going to completely CC you or just destroy you, and their ads move right after the boss move, because the boss is going to just outspeed you and do some crazy stuff. Then that's when having immunity is kind of good. Let's just assume for a second that Druid meets that speed requirement, even though she doesn't. And I have her on immunity as well, so everybody might take that hit at first and it might get debuffed, but you put the immunity on top of it to mitigate any other debuffs on top of it. Then plus you still have your cleanser, and if your cleanser is meeting resistance requirements, which for resistance you definitely want to have 100% resistance. I would not come into a fight with a cleanser with less than 100% resistance, at least if it's your main cleanser. If it's your main cleanser, 100% resistance for sure. I would not go less than that. Even if it makes me slightly tankier, and the reason why is because the power in resisting any inability effects, so that's stuns of all nature, whether it's freeze, fear, paralyze, all that stuff, any of those, the ability to resist those, even mutes and things like that, and be able to cleanse your whole team even though they have been debuffed, is clutch, because that means now your team able to get their turns, that next turn start doing things and make those fights happen, and things would be a lot better. So let's talk about some of the debuffing type of things. When it comes to the CC, you want to have some kind of inability effects, just like I was saying, what you want to prevent yourself from if that happens to happen. So having Herman, the Water Bassi, is a good thing, and definitely want some skill ups in him so you can get the 2 turns on his freeze. I don't think I have him max skill, but I got him. Or is he max skill? No, he's not. I don't even have the cool time on him. I just got him all the way to having his 2 turn freeze happen, because that is definitely important, having that on this 2-star unit. This happens to be max skill because we put a lot of skill ups into him just to get this far. Do max him out, because that will just be beneficial for you all around, having how many turns? 4 skills to be up rather than 5. But since I run in CDR, sometimes 2 CDR, I have it up relatively fast. And when you provide the right unit synergy and the right mitigation, those turns will come back pretty relatively quick, and you don't have to worry about it as much. Extra added CC is turn bar reduction, and then you got your air bassy here, George, my buddy George here, which provides you that. Now, George doesn't really need skill ups, not necessarily. I don't think I put any skill ups into George anyway. No, George doesn't really need skill ups because it's all damage, and you're not really using George for the damage. It's mostly for the CC and the poisons if you can land them, because of George passive, which is if you land a critical attack, still 70% of the turn bar, and poisons down for 2 turns. So you can get that passive poison as well as still in that turn bar, which is going to give George more turns and more opportunities to kill turn bars. So you're pretty much just watching the enemy's bars and trying to make sure everything doesn't happen. And then you definitely want to get him, if you can get him at 100% crit, beautiful. If you can get him at about 60% accuracy, beautiful. He's really rough to stat because of those. So meeting that 80% minimum on crit will definitely carry you through most of TOT. And I miss a lot of the poisons here and there. It's kind of random. It's like sometimes he's landing poisons like crazy, even with 41% in the higher stages. And sometimes he's just missing them left and right in the higher stages. So it's not that great, but the most important thing is making sure he has that crit. And this is just a 2-star unit that's like critically important to have. Like the Bassy Dual Herman and George, I cannot stress this so much. If you don't have these guys built, or if you don't have them, you should be summoning right now after seeing this video and pulling these guys. Now there are like unit replacements that you can have that can do things a little better, or just are tankier because they're really squishy and you don't want either one of them to be touched. Like for Herman, Sapphire is kind of like a replacement, just because I can get more stats on Sapphire, even though I do like the 2-turn freeze and the 1-turn freeze and the turn bar reduction, because essentially it's like the same thing. Sapphire is tankier, so definitely with survival, and that's like practically all you need for CC. George, mostly you want on boss fights. You don't really need George, and that's the Air Bassy. You don't really need George for your main team, just mostly for boss fights. And you might deal with some pesky force, or bring in a buff block like the Air Pony is. Mine's not built for TOT, but the Air Pony is definitely a good unit to bring, because you have a cleanse as well if you're dealing with those kind of issues on top of having that buff block. But you will have to get the accuracy up there, though. The 80% accuracy is definitely going to be important. Mine is not there, so trying to use my pony in TOT doesn't quite happen and cause you to lose fights that you shouldn't lose. TOT 6 September. Excuse me. So yeah, I start talking about buffs, and we need to be talking about debuffs, right? Or debuffs. Now, you don't need quite everything, but then there's going to be a point where you will probably need certain skills, and making sure you having like the right CC for AoE. Some things that could be great AoE, but it's also decent for if you miss a CC, like having a blind or a confuse. Having blind or confuse as a single target is still really good, because if you miss the CC on a unit, you can come back and bring a unit that provides a blind, or a unit that provides confuse to help mitigate the damage that the enemy does, causing them to miss what they do, hurt themselves, or buff your team, or debuff their own team, things like that. So having those little skills and units that kind of compound, where they have multiple skills that can be beneficial, like that is in the forms of your CC, is definitely important. So Herman, he kind of takes the cake in that kit, which makes him like probably one of the best units for TOT, and as far as your progression goes. Now, another unit I was playing around with before I pulled Sapphire was the Earth Witch. Now she hits everybody and has an AoE 50% turn bar reduction. I mean, a full turn bar reduction on a versus a 50%. Yeah, I don't think I need the 50% unit anymore. It sucks because it was like, all right, I didn't really have anything to kill turn bars for the whole enemy team, so she was a perfect unit, and I used her for a bit, and she's a great unit to build in that regard. And I mean, I was using my fighter Necro, but once he had got that nerf, it's just like he's still good in PvP. The rest of the game, not so sure. I mean, I still kind of play around with him, but he's just like George. He's really tough to glyph. You need good crit on him, good accuracy. You still got to get like speed, HP, and defense. I got a bunch of other great units that I want to build. I would rather spread out those glyphs and make all those different units decent rather than trying to put all my best glyphs on one unit that can only do one or two things for me, where these other units I can use in multiple areas. So I'm kind of like iffy about that with him right now. He's still decent, but the fact that you can't rely on his CC capabilities anymore. He's just not as. But that's just if you had this unit or something like that. But yeah. But where I'm getting at is just providing yourself with the right CC, making sure you just don't let the enemy get turned. Now, as further as damage go, your main sources of damage is gonna be poison, parasite, curse, and units that scale off of enemies' HP. I haven't really tried the enemy HP scaling in TOT yet, like Earth Zine, because I had her built for the raid, and I just recently pulled my Fire Mystic, so I haven't really test out like on a boss floor for TOT, so I don't really know how well it's going to be for me personally. I've seen other images and videos of other people doing it, so I know it's really good in regards to those people. So I'm sure it'll be the same for me. So that's some testing I have to do. But for the rest of us, most people are going to be using poisoners as your main source of DPS, which is passive DPS. But we have finally entered the parasite meta. And I say we finally entered the parasite meta because we have this nice new two-star, the Fire Kabir. I've been playing around with them a bit. I got to do a lot more testing just to see really the benefits of them, because the second skill has a parasite on it, which is pretty strong. Parasite is probably the strongest form of passive DPS. I don't know, Curse is kind of strong too, but Curse you have to rely on like stacking and CCing. I guess all the passive DPS is like stacking and CCing. So it's kind of hand in hand with Curse, because if you drop enough Curse on an enemy, you can completely wipe their whole HP bar out just off Curse alone. But if the enemy gets turns or you're not able to keep them locked down and controlled, then that's when Parasite is really strong, because on the first turn of because I believe this sits for like 3 turns, yeah. So like the first turn of Parasite is 8%, and then you get then you gradually gain more percent, so 8% for every turn that Parasite is on. So it's going to be 16% of the enemy's max HP as damage done, and then 24% right after. Right, if math is not hurting me right now, but right after that. So that's a lot of damage. Like I used to watch my faceless when I first started like touching TOT, watching my faceless like hit a boss for like 60k just off of having 2 parasites on a boss, and I was able to CC them enough and not allow them to get that many turns. So once the second one was on like its second turn, and then the third one was on its last turn, you just see big damage come up on the screen. I'm like, oh my god, and just see a boss go from half health to 0 in just one slot. So I believe the Burning Kabir is really going to be strong in that area. And if you have one, oh yeah, definitely build him. He's going to be a powerful unit for TOT. This is currently his stats, not the best. I really don't have his glyphs leveled up because I just threw whatever random glyphs on just so I can just play around and test them out a little bit to see how it goes. I've already seen like a bunch of people just showing off images and everything of him just kind of like stacking parasites, just him alone stacking parasites like crazy. So I'm really excited to be able to do that myself. So, and poison is still strong. Don't get me wrong, poison is still strong. But if you don't really have a unit that pops poisons in your team, like if you had the water tree, which can pop poisons as well as apply poisons, and if you got other units applying poisons, once the water tree pops some damage. I mean, Fire Kappa is good as well, but you know, do you got the room to have a unit that's really not providing CC, because your teams should be built around having the CC, and then you're generally just having one unit as a DPS. For the most part, you know, the team's definitely going to vary as you go along and as you start getting experienced and figuring out how to get through certain hurdles and obstacles that you might come across. Let's talk a little bit about team building. When it comes to team building, the first things that come to mind, let me check out my notes here. 2 CC units, your main healer, your CDR, which can also have a cleanse or heal or whatever other skills that it may have, and then your DPS. So that's like your 5-man team. So for me, a normal team would be something like this, or I can take Herman out, put George in on the boss floor. Nowadays, I'm running a little advanced and running solo CC because I have a second WHS, so my cooldowns are up relatively fast, so do things like that. Alright, I can also do, let's just say Herman and George together as my CC duel. So there's definitely options. So you know, you got your 2 CC spots, your main healer, your off healer, as well as your CDR and cleanse all in one, and then your DPS. And that's pretty much how it is. Let's say if you had an Earth Fellow Core as your DPS. Let's say you had like the Water Druid or something, or I think the Air Druid or something as your main healer. And let's say you had the Air Crusader as your CDR off healer type of unit. That's still a really good team, and it will synergize well with what you got going on and what you're doing for your TOT team. So that's kind of like some of the basics of team building. I mean, if I really wanted to get froggy, and I'm probably going to try this out too. I'm probably going to try this out and do something like, that was going to be you, and we 5-star units, so we don't know where they are no more. So something like this, where I'm running 2 off healers, so to speak. So it's like we still have heals, but we're relying on having maximum amount of damage and trying to get our CC up high. So it's like 2 DPS, 2 CDR, 1 CC. Like that's something I'm probably going to be testing out pretty soon to see how that works out for me. So that's like the basic setup for like team building and everything. And this video is getting awfully long, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I want to finish off by saying, you know, if you're having problems on floors, you getting advice from people, you getting my advice, you getting things, you're trying to meet those requirements, you're close but not quite there, but you think you can do it, just be patient, because TOT takes a lot of patience. Sometimes you might not have enough of the right stats, so you got to rely a little more on RNG. And RNG might not be working in your favor these first few runs, but then you get that next run, the boss miss on the right unit, or you land all of your debuffs, you get all the CC, and things just go well from there, and you just kind of get that snowball effect, and finally just clear where, you know, you just did like 5 runs in a row the other day and it didn't work and it just took you like 2 tries today. That's kind of how I gotta be. Sometimes you gotta step back from it, regroup, come back at it, and see what you can do next. So this is the Gamer Dude signing out. I hope this helps some of you guys really get your heads geared for going into TOT. I'm sure there's plenty of other things that I could have said or talked about, but we're gonna leave that for some of you other guys that's out there that's experiencing everything to, you know, leave that in the comment section below, because why not talk about it and get this information out to more and more people. And you can always catch me in the MMEG Discord and the TOT chat. Hey, just at me in the chat if you got something you want to say. Something you want to say, you want to talk to me. I'm pretty sure I can come in there and holler at you for a minute if I can. But until then, I'm out. Deuces.